All right, good morning, folks. I am awake in here. Let's see if this is actually streaming the way it's supposed to be. Huh. Oh. This involves me doing things in the YouTube app, which I'm not great at. I can't tell. I am waiting for confirmation that this is actually live. Oh. Yay, apparently it is live. Uh, I'm having a blueberry muffin for breakfast. Don't judge me. It's not the best blueberry muffin in the world, but it's a Lidl one, so far from the worst. And I remembered tea this morning. Yay, tea. Let's make sure audio is working. Oh, the first sip of tea of the morning. A blessed, blessed thing. Okay. Audio is good too, apparently. So we're going to continue work on the dice tower today. And I had some thoughts to share that I'll share while we work on the dice tower. First, let's just get a look at the dice tower. This is primed now. I didn't bother recording the priming. I want to talk about something I see people do wrong a lot when they prime materials. They coat it. They make a complete and utter coating of the priming. And if this had been this, would be solid white now. You do not need, at least with decent primer, to do that. Now, first of all, if you're out there buying like $30 Games Workshop primer, please stop. This is some of the best primer you can buy. It is way cheaper than Games Workshop branded stuff. And when you use it, you only need a light coating. You do not need a complete layer of it. What you need is something that helps the paint stick to the material. Oh, tea good. So I don't tend to plan out every element before I start painting. I just pick the elements I like and start painting. And I've got a ton of paints here. So I did not retrieve paints in advance. So I'm going to do that now and pick out a couple colors. I think I'll start with the wooden fence. This just needs a nice wooden brown. I'm picking out several colors that I can look at more closely under the light to determine what I like most for it. And right now, I'm just going to do a simple flat layer. I'll worry about shading and colors later. So these are some P3 paints. I have a bunch of Citadel ones over here too, and some Vallejo and another recent brand I started getting that I really like. So here's a Beast Hide Brown. That works fine for wood, but maybe a little lighter than I want for this. A second thing of Beast Hide I apparently have. I must have forgotten I had one. I cannot even read what the color on that is, but it's a nice darker brown. That might be a winner. And then Blood Tracker Brown. That's a nice deep brown. I think I'll probably end up going with that. Been a little while since I used this paint, so shaking it up to make sure it's not settled and is distributed decently. Let me arrange a few things here. I need to tidy up parts of my desk. Handy dandy water. I like these because these jars, because they're made to hermetically seal. You could hear that pop when I opened it, but it makes it easy to transport if you want to paint on the go, which I sometimes like to do. And then brushes. I'll bring over, this is one of my paint brush holders. You need lots of different brushes for different purposes. You know, everything from your nice fine detailed work like this to just, you need to slab the stuff on. And yes, this is an El Cheapo brush. It is not for delicate work. For this, I don't want to put a lot of paint in between the cracks, so I'll go with a sort of medium-sized brush. All right. So something I was thinking about earlier this morning is a variation on something I've thought about a lot, which is I'm a frequent Redditor lurker. I don't post much on Reddit, but I lurk a lot. And I lurk in things like men's advice and men's relationship forums. I'm always curious about interactions between men and women, a lot of which is what takes place on there. Okay, let me reposition a few things here so you can see what I'm doing. And one of my frequent gripes about these forums is that I see men, usually younger men, but not always, talk about relationships as if women are a problem to solve. And I noticed the language, while not specifically this, could easily be interpreted like somebody trying to solve how to defeat an encounter in a video game, which is not probably the most respectful way to talk about human beings. And I'm using deliberately soft language there to be ironic. It's not the appropriate way to talk about women. But then I thought this morning, something that I hadn't thought before, which is what if this was actually a constructive way to get some people, some NEETs, some shut-ins, actual information that might communicate to them through a medium they understand, because they certainly don't seem to understand women. So I'm going to try that, just as a mental exercise while we're on stream here. Knowing fully well this is the internet, and people may take some of my quotes out of context to roast me. Oh well. So the first thing for our neat translation of women is that no woman is a common encounter. Every woman is a unique boss fight or rare special spawn. You're going to have to learn that individual mob's behavior. You cannot assume that anything you've learned from some other woman is going to apply to the next one. Next up, they will have what is called emergent behavior. This next part is going to be said with a lot of sarcasm, so please follow along. But the AI learns and has lots of variant little behaviors based on very specific circumstances you can't predict. Almost like real people. Shocking, I know. So, unlike a lot of video games, you don't have to fight the spawn here. You can choose to bypass an encounter, which is sometimes the best choice. Frankly, sometimes the loot some women drop is just not very good. It's certainly not worth the resources it takes sometimes. Some women are just much better spawns than others. It's just the truth. And that will depend on your build. You know, some drop loot that's perfect for your build and not good for someone else's. I feel like I'm really torturing the analogy at this point. But yeah, you will have to learn each one. You'll have to learn what takes them down. For example, I've always been a fan of picnics. I have found picnics are a great way to ingratiate myself with a lady because it shows I'm capable of planning. It shows that I'm thinking about doing something fun with them, that I have a romantic side. And yes, I think about all this stuff in advance, about how I want to present myself to them. In my teens and 20s, I dated a lot of goth girls, and those picnics were often at cemeteries. And it worked. If it was something like a preacher's daughter, it often told the parents that I was a nice, conservative, traditional lad. Yeah, that really didn't work. I had long hair and listened to heavy metal, and everyone knew it. I still have long hair and listen to heavy metal, come to think of it. Does that mean I haven't changed since my teenage years? I don't know. I think I've added on to who I am, but not taken away. Hopefully I'm a little wiser than I was then, because I was an idiot. Most teenagers are idiots. Sorry, teens listening. You are. A lot of people stay idiots. The goal of life to me is to kind of add on. Not to necessarily become a different person, but to add on and become wiser and smarter. And part of that is with women, if you're a guy, and you're a heterosexual guy, or bisexual, pansexual. There's a bunch of sexuals. Anyway, if you're a guy who likes girls, at least some of the time. But yeah, you need to learn what, to torture this video game analogy further, what they are vulnerable to. I mean, every girl likes to have attention paid to them. Absolutely. I mean, this is just like relationship 101. You like to have attention paid to you. We like to feel we're in a relationship with somebody that pays attention to us. But what really specially communicates that for that person? Because people are individuals. Oh, sorry, I forgot the analogy. Women are unique spawns. So what are they vulnerable to? Are they especially vulnerable to you paying attention to their dog? Do you want to read things that they love so you can talk to them about it and they really enjoy that? Do they love a man that can cook? I've always been fond of cooking, and so it's been a win-win for me to have a woman impressed with my cooking. Do they like somebody who's kind of manly around the house? Offer to fix little things for them if you can. If you're really into the girl and you don't know how to fix things, learn. That's another thing about relationships a lot of people don't seem to get. Relationships are work. And it's okay to put work into relationships. In fact, if you don't, it's a sign that you don't really care. And nobody wants a relationship with somebody who doesn't care about the relationship, because it means they don't care about you as part of the relationship. I think this brown is looking nice. The 3D print does have some little knots in the wood. Those would be nice to add some depth to, maybe with some black ink or a darker brown mix. But yeah, learn what they're vulnerable to. Get a sense of how long the encounter is going to be. I mean, how much are you willing to put into this? Is this a girl you like and you want to take out on a few dates and just hang out with? Or is this somebody you could see yourself, really committing some of your life to? I'm not saying that you initially make a decision for the rest of your life. I mean, that needs to come in time. But you can usually, after a date or two, analogize it as, the first couple attempts at the encounter. Get a sense of whether this is going to be a fight you enjoy or not. Because here's the thing, that unlike in video games, where the analogy really breaks down, basically all of these encounters are avoidable. You do not need any of them to progress. And it is okay to say, this looks like it'd be a fun mob to, encounter, but as I'm doing the fight, it's not fun. I'm not enjoying it. I'm going to move on to a different one where my, water-based attacks are more effective or whatever. Just means that they may not be a good match for you, personality-wise. Okay, I have to ask chat at this point. Is this analogy pretty much dead? I don't know if anyone's actually listening in chat. Anyway, that's me babbling about men and women. I get frustrated with men a lot. Our society has done both genders a pretty big disservice by spending generations emphasizing our differences, making it seem as if we're completely different species of creatures. We're not. Ultimately, the truth is, and this may weird some people out, our tiddly bits are a relatively small part of us. Yeah, they really are. I mean, as a heterosexual man, it's kind of a weird thought to have because, I put a lot of stock in those tiddly bits. Tiddly bits, fiddly bits. But the truth is that as a whole, as a human being, they're a pretty small part of us. Culturally, it leads to some differences, sure. But I've always said that whether or not somebody likes Lord of the Rings is a much bigger indicator of who they are as a person than whether or not they have a uterus or testicles. And no, I'm not dating anybody who doesn't like Lord of the Rings. Sorry, just too much personality difference. They're looking for, I don't know, some other kind of game, maybe a dating sim, while I'm looking for an RPG. Dating sims, by the way, are probably one of the worst possible analogies for how actual relationships work. They definitely teach people that if you do A, B, C, then D will work. That is just not even close to reality. A really complex boss fight with AI that learns as you maneuver and adjusts its behavior is a better analogy. Because again, almost like real people. Now, as I say this, I probably should point out that there are video games this analogy does not work for at all, like, say, Elden Ring. Elden Ring is a great game, and it has very complex fight behavior, but ultimately, it's very difficult, but has a very specific pattern to it. Women do not have very specific patterns, usually. There are exceptions. There are women out there who are simpler than this, but most women will adapt their behavior based on yours. Here's another place the video game analogy falls down. Sometimes they will become more favorable to you, and your attacks will become easier to land as they like you. That girl who didn't laugh at any of your jokes once upon a time, as she starts warming up to you, may suddenly find you funnier. Now, here's another thing that I'm going to do a mini rant on while I'm painting this fence. And that is that a lot of men are really bad at being heterosexual. I've said this a lot in different times and places. Hold on, I need tea. And then I need to get the inside of the fence here. And I'm noticing some lines I should have filled in on here that I didn't before when I was doing the putty. Oh well, it's an iterative process. Oh, blessed tea. So men are bad at being heterosexuals. This is true. I was working on a story under my own name, Leto Armitage, last night, called A Wild Bunny Girl. And there's a discussion of this that may make it into the final story. I don't know. I'm debating it. But men are bad at being heterosexual. Men look at a woman and go, oh, nice tits, nice ass, nice whatever. It's like, okay, well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Women do that too. Women like physical features on men. But culturally, men are kind of encouraged to stop there. I mean, we even have language in Western culture of things like you're a tits man, you're an ass man. I find it kind of repulsive. I mean, not to say I don't like tits and ass, I do. But haven't you had the experience? If you haven't had enough of these experiences where you meet somebody and maybe you're not even initially attracted to them, but the longer you know them and the better you get to know them, the more attractive they get. There are certainly women who've had this experience, I know. But men are kind of discouraged from that. Men are encouraged to think very visually and very one-notedly, to the degree that it's pretty much implied by our culture that they're not very manly if they have deeper thoughts than that. That is not a good thing. I will tell you, some of my best relationships have been with women that I wasn't initially attracted to, but as I got to know them, felt that they were really great people and they were fun and sexy. And if anyone thinks sexy is a purely visual thing, oh my God, you definitely need to let go of that. Please, for the love of God, let go of that. First of all, the makeup's not always on. Oh, and tip for writers, especially if you're writing women. Learn about makeup. I put this in a newsletter once that you need to learn about women's clothing, but you need to learn about makeup too. It is absolutely astounding to me how many men don't understand what makeup does and how impactful it can be. Women can completely change how they look with makeup. And I know so many men, I've seen surveys of this on Reddit where men go, oh, my wife never wears makeup, only to be shocked to discover she wears makeup all the time, and he, in fact, does not know what she looks like without it. Yeah, there's a reason that like makeup people in Hollywood are a skilled profession. It is amazing what can be done with it. I strongly recommend for every man out there, and this is a relatively recent thing, that if you do not understand the basics of makeup, I'm not saying you have to become, a super skilled person with it. You don't have to become, ready to do the lupine makeup in the next Twilight movie or whatever. But watch a few YouTube tutorials on makeup. Learn the basics of what things like eyeshadow and blush do. If you are of a geeky persuasion, think about painting models like this and what highlighting and shade does for creating definition. And then imagine it on a much larger scale of a human being and how it can work to create subtlety. That's right. If you know how to paint models, you should be able to extend that expertise a little bit to the face, at least conceptually. I mean, the actual skills have quite a few differences, of course, but conceptually, the idea of creating depth through shadow and creating highlighting is the same. Excuse me while I touch up a few spots here. And even if you're not a writer, it is worth it just as a man, if you are a type of man that likes women, to learn this stuff so that you understand the women in your life. If your woman says she needs 30 minutes longer than normal to get ready for this special event you're going to, and you're sighing, going, oh God, what does she do doing all that time? She's painting herself a lot of the time. She's doing other things to prepare herself. She's doing things both to look good for you and to look good for herself. And the truth is, as much as some men try to deny it, men do the exact same thing. In terms of an end goal, men want to look good for other men. Men have a constant sort of little power struggle where they... Washing my brush, if you hear a weird sound. Men don't want to look inferior to other men. It's just our setup for it is a lot simpler. We kind of got the easy mode. If we want to go back to the video game analogy, in terms of how people have to present themselves, women by default start life on expert mode, and we start on casual tourist, can't die mode. We can get injured because we wear a shitty outfit, but we're men, so the game doesn't kill us. Can't believe I'm still getting some mileage out of this analogy. All right. Now that paint's going to take a little while to dry. I could get out the hair dryer, but it's up on a pegboard way up there, and I don't feel like it. So what do I want to work on next? I think the roof will be slate. That'll be brick. So maybe a reddish tone for the brick. Thinking definitely a darker tone, something I can add highlights to, in addition to setting the mortar between it. I could have gone ahead and done the door and some of these wooden bits here in the beams for the house, but I think I'd like to do those in a different color wood, just to not be so samey. Here's some of the seams I was talking about I missed when I was doing the putty before. I'll need to go back in and fill those in. Barrels are definitely worth doing. Let's see, what do I want to do with the barrels? Kind of want them to be a little offset in color too. I might do the beast hide for the barrels, make them like long weathered in the sun. This is me shaking up a P3 beast hide, which is just sort of a more tan brown. What did I do with my brush? Did I put it up? I think I did. And then, of course, the banding I will do in probably a steel, and then the rivets maybe in a bronze. So I'm using this more tan brown for the barrels, but I'm going to put in a really dark sort of ink to deepen the crevices, really dark. Make this more of a weathered effect where it's still going to be light. Ah! I just put my hand on the wet paint. Okay, not my brightest moment. It's early in the morning. I'm not awake. Although, honestly, that's something I could do anytime. More tea. Chin chin. I almost did it again. Any questions from chat? It wasn't super glue this time. Yes, it wasn't super glue this time. And I've damaged many a shirt to super glue while doing modeling stuff over the years, and as well as getting it on my hands. If life was a video game, I would have built up resistance to super glue on my epidermis by now. So some of you may be wondering, what does this have to do with writing? Not much. Lynn does very regular writing streams where she writes and streams, and I think that's wonderful. It's just, I don't know. I was thinking about doing something on camera, and I thought it'd be fun to paint and do this kind of stuff and just chat. This weekend, I am continuing work on A Wild Bunny Girl. I'm pretty close to done with my original vision for it, and then realized it's awfully short, about 2,500 words. And really thinking I need to expand that out. But the original idea doesn't call for it, that much content. So I'm trying to decide what to do. And what I may do is make it a two-parter where I keep A Wild Bunny Girl very short, but have an immediate follow-up. for Hexennacht. I may be mispronouncing that. A holiday that comes at the end of April, but I haven't decided exactly how to represent it yet. Oh, the game comparison was good. All right. So Wild Bunny Girl is basically the story of a fellow who finds a wayward neighbor who can't get into her house on his back deck, getting out of the rain, and some sexy times ensue. This is going to be hard to show to the camera, but trust me, I'm doing some painting and some crevices down here. And it's ended up at about 2,500 words, and I'm pretty happy with it. But it is on the shorter side. And I was thinking, well, maybe to do another holiday nearby and combine them, you know, two very short stories together into one product, so to speak. And I was looking at holidays because as an American, it's very easy to, you know, assume American holidays, but I kind of hate doing that. A lot of people don't give a crap about our 4th of July or stuff like that. I mean, something like Thanksgiving, I don't mind doing things for. And obviously, I did a Thanksgiving themed story for my Neighbors series. But even if people don't have a holiday called Thanksgiving, and there are several other countries that do, you know, the idea of a holiday to give thanks and have friends and family around, I think is universal enough that even if somebody doesn't celebrate that exact holiday, it still communicates well to them. But the cultural nuance of, say, a 4th of July, not that there's a whole lot of nuance to it. We're Americans. We tend to be pretty blunt about things, often to our detriment. It may not communicate as well. So I was looking around, and there's a Catholic holiday, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name of the saint, but it's a saint's holiday that is traditionally to ward off black magic, evil magic, witches and stuff. And apparently, in a few places, like I think it was Finland, it is very heavily celebrated. It's a major, major holiday. If I'm wrong about it being Finland, I apologize to any Finns. You have enough torturing your lives without me adding on to it. Yeah. But apparently this holiday has been kind of co-opted by other entities. Now I'm going to talk about a topic that may offend some people, but bear with me and keep an open mind. There is this entity called the Satanic Temple. Now, if Satanism to you is stuff from the old 80s Chick tracts or the Anton LaVey brand of Satanism, or God help us, LaVey's predecessors like Aleister Crowley, or LaVey's daughters who sued him and all kinds of stuff, or maybe he sued them, I don't remember. Anyway, none of it is that. The modern Satanism is actually not religious in nature at all. In fact, most members of the Satanic Temple appear to be atheists. But what they do believe is that government and society should not push religion on anyone. Government should not favor religion. And ironically, actually be, this idea fascinates me, a very devout Catholic and member of the Satanic Temple. A lot of people don't realize this about Catholicism because, unfortunately, people are inconsistent and horrible. But Catholicism is, at its really very science-friendly, very science-positive. It is a central tenet of true Catholicism that God is truth. And when something is determined to be true, it must be an aspect of God. And this is, in my mind, a very important tenet of Catholicism, really critical. I think I'll do the door in the same color. So, yes, you could be both a Catholic and a Satanic Temple member. So, if they're really primarily atheists, why do they call themselves Satanists? Well, I have never liked that because I have traditionally, here's the door, disliked the pomp of it. You know, it always felt very edgelord to me. Ooh, we're going to act against organized religion and we're just going to be ridiculous and attention grabbing by calling ourselves Satanists. That's traditionally been my attitude. And it's still my gut reaction feeling, if I'm to be completely honest. But with what I've seen with the rise of religion inserting itself into government of late, maybe I was wrong. Maybe we need that kind of extreme pomp to get people's attention, to point out the hypocrisies. Maybe the edgelords were actually right all along. That's a scary thought to me personally. I mean, yeah, the Satanists often do enjoy some silly rituals, sometimes involving a lot of nudity and heavy metal. But, you know, frankly, I've done those in my life without any religious elements, so I'm down. I don't know, would it look better for the wood to have a different coloration or to continue the theming with the fence? And by wood, I mean like the beams here. I don't know. I reserve these to do in something lighter or darker for contrast. Pondering. I don't want it to become too one note. I want some variety of color. I'll even have to paint the dice entry layer here in something interesting. Let's see. So anyway, that's kind of my painting and chatting for the morning. I want to keep going a little bit. Let me see if I can find a slate and start on, well, not a slate, either a slate for the top or a nice red for the bricks. Let me put these paints up, see what I can find. There's a good gray. That would work for the slate. Here's a decent red. I'd probably want to darken it with some dark brown. But that's certainly doable. This might be a good brick here. Let's see. Let's go for the gray for the roof first. This is Bastion Gray from P3 Paints. These are old P3 paints. I've had them for ages. They've just recently started production again now that Steamforged owns the IP. Oh, I see more cracks here I need to fill in that I didn't see before. Oh, well. That's all right. I expect these things to take multiple steps. Let's start the roof, and let's see what we think of this. I don't love this gray, but I think it'll definitely work. I'll do some dry brushing to add highlights as I go. So anyway, I was talking about this holiday. So the Satanic Temple has taken this holiday that was made to ward off evil, and they use it to sort of commemorate and celebrate women who have been accused of black magic and persecuted through history, such as, the local witches who really were making herbal remedies for people and stuff like that. And I like that idea. We talk about how horrible it was that we had witch trials and whatnot, but how many women got persecuted for just being good community members by, paranoid, suspicious people? Unfortunately, humans have not done a good job of raising themselves above their base instincts there, as seen by a lot of elections of late. I'm not going to get into that too much right now, but trust me, I have opinions. So then I was thinking, okay, Easter is what a wild bunny girl sort of celebrates. Maybe the characters could rejoin for a follow-up scene if one of them celebrates this holiday, this Satanic Temple holiday. Would that be a hard sell in the story? I don't know. What do you think? Pet, what do you think? The character is not particularly gothy or anything, by the way. Although we don't get to know a whole lot about her other than she's a voyeur and exhibitionist in the first story. But I want to expand her character more and the male protagonist a bit more. Oh, and random trivia for those who've read my Neighborly Gestures stories, this actually takes place in the same neighborhood, like on the flip side of the cul-de-sac. So it is definitely in the same Dayrise universe. If I continue with these folks, may have to have a visit from Harley or somebody at some point from the Neighborly Gestures stories. Random trivia. At one point, I actually considered making a sort of poly family story out of Adam and Harley's relationship and add others. And I quickly dismissed that. It just didn't feel right for those characters to me. I like writing poly relationships. Okay, we have one vote for more Harley. We can definitely have more Harley. I like Harley too. Harley is one of those emergent characters that takes you by surprise. I did not originally plan for Harley to exist in the stories at all. But I was thinking of complications, and I thought, well, what if Adam had a girlfriend and initiate this relationship with. Sorry. So, what if he has to negotiate this sort of power exchange relationship and gets a girlfriend? This is the sort of that happens. I've had it happen to me. I know people who've had it happen to them. What is it going to be like? And then I thought to myself, well, what if. Sorry, I found some 3D printing cruft here I have to clean up. What if we remove the cliche of the girlfriend and who's jealous and doesn't like his power relationship? And of course, there's a bunch of ways you could go with that. You could go with you know, a cut queen kind of thing, which is sexy, but didn't feel right to me. It felt too fantasy wish fulfillment. Then I was like, well, you know what, oddly, we don't get much representation of in romance erotica fiction is asexuals. I mean, what if somebody is not a romantic, but, you know, very much romantic, but not very sexual, and not jealous of an external sexual relationship because it's not what propels them? And Harley just kind of jumped into my mind at that point. And I always worry when writing a character like that because I really want to do them justice. I don't want to be, you know, the external hetero male gay LGBTQ characters and, you know, putting them through my interpretation. And I've known asexual people in my life that I try to draw on for this while still making it a unique character. And Harley was fun. So yeah, I definitely think we'll see Harley again. I have not so far written anything about what either Josh or Brooke from A Wild Bunny Girl do. I do have in my mind what Brooke does, and it's not really story relevant. But I might do something with Josh where he can be sociable enough to connect characters from different stories. Like maybe run a game store or something. Is that a bit convenient? Absolutely. But I'm not doing a real life sim here. I am, however, painting the sides of these slates. Shake it, shake it. So you probably won't see Wild Bunny Girl until next year, but I'm going to do a number of holiday themed things with new and existing characters. I have a very solid idea in my mind for Sakura and Helen coming back for a combination Valentine's Day, White Day story. For those unfamiliar with the Japanese tradition, Valentine's Day is celebrated by women giving men chocolate, or just, you know, romantic paramours, I guess, for in their case, since Helen and Sakura are both femme and both present and are women. And then on White Day, traditionally, the man then reciprocates to show his interest. Now, in this case, with Sakura and Helen, Helen is, I would not call Helen butch by any stretch of the imagination. She's very femme, but she's maybe a little more androgynous than Sakura. And Sakura doesn't mind it when Helen is butch at all, but likes her in her femme state too. She just loves Helen in general. And so I think I'm going to do, well, not think, I am doing a Valentine's Day story with Helen giving Sakura a gift, and then a White Day story with Sakura giving, with Sakura giving Helen a gift on Valentine's Day, and then Helen reciprocating on White Day. And so I'm going to do a bunch of these Halloween, not Halloween, holiday stories for release next year in sort of a regular series. I will definitely do something for Halloween too. I just don't know what yet. I have a long gestating idea for a horror story, but horror erotica, but I've not found myself interested in actually writing it yet. Other holidays I may do, Guy Fawkes Day. I want to do a Guy Fawkes Day story. I know that's kind of breaking my nationalist connection story, but principle. But it's Guy Fawkes Day, bonfires, all that. It's fun. Kind of have to do a Christmas story. Already did a Thanksgiving, even though it's tied up into the neighborly gestures stuff. Rotate this so you can see it a little better. I got some paint on my fingers. Of course I did. I'm not worried about this being perfect right now. You'll notice that, I'm hitting some of the other sides a little bit. What I'm concerned at this point is just creating a nice layer and filling it in everywhere it should be. Little detail cleanup will happen later, and many, many steps. There's a rule that you should only worry about what you can see from like 2 or 3 feet away. I'm bad about following that rule. I sit up close to it and look at little tiny details that I miss. But even I, at a certain point, go, okay, that's enough. I am not a perfectionist. I'm just not completely lazy about it. But for example, when you're doing brushing and combining layers for fades, you can spend insane amounts of time getting that perfect. And I have done that. I have the technical skill to do it. You know what I also discovered? That I didn't care. I have had professional painters tell me that I am good enough to do commissions at a pretty high level. However, I don't actually tend to want to spend that much time on a single piece. It is, so yes, I can, but I don't. And you're not going to see me on stream do that unless I do it just because I want to sort of prove to myself I can still do it. It's been a long time since I've taken that much time and effort on a single piece. So, a wild bunny girl. We celebrate Easter and Hexennachts. Easter, which can definitely be a sort of pagan holiday too. Definitely pagan inspired. Dun, 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 dun. I'll have to think of some more stories for them. They may become the main characters of recurring stories for the holidays. Dun, 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 dun. One thing I'm going to want to think about is places like here, the tower, are not brick. So there's probably going to be a different stone. And I'm going to want to cover up those lines created by the 3D printer. So probably a fairly heavy layer of paint. Which can be dangerous. You don't want, and I'm going to go back to a very 80s reference here. You don't want it to end up looking like Tammy Faye Baker's face. For those too young to remember Tammy Faye Baker, A, be grateful. B, think clown makeup. Heavy grease paint. That's what I'm talking about. Alrighty. So I will be working on a wild bunny girl today. Worked on it some yesterday. And I'll also be working a little bit on some rat catcher releases. Something I'm doing is switching rat catchers from pretty much every day to Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I've enjoyed getting it off the ground, but I need time to write other stuff as well. And in the Ratcatcher serial, we are coming up on our first actual combat scene. Yunji did not get to really show off her abilities in the first adventure because they had to avoid the fight that they were horribly unprepared for. But this time she gets to actually flex her muscles some, which will make her happy. And we've got to learn more about Parchment, and there's a lot more of Parchment to come. He's a fun little character. I can give him the abilities to learn how to talk. I'm debating if I should do that. Strictly by Pathfinder 2 rules, he already could. And I need to publish his stat block. Bonfire Night could, I'm catching up with chat. Bonfire Night could be hot. Yes, I think Bonfire Night could be awesome. Tell us more about rat catchers and the two main characters. Okay, so I just referred to them a little bit here, but the two main characters right now are Smythe and Youngji. Smythe is a nerdy orc, technically part orc, but he favors the orc side fairly heavily. And he's a wizard. And we're starting to learn more about his background. In fact, he's starting to learn some more things about his background and starting to have questions about his deceased grandmother. That will pop back up in far future stories. Youngji is an immigrant to Almadra. Almadra is an old dwarven city that the dwarves disappeared from and was taken over by human settlers. And Youngji was a very distant relation in the royal line of her home country and left because she wanted to do more and do other things. Specifically, whoops, I missed a spot of the fence down here. Hold on. She has very high goals for herself. She wants to ascend to divinity. And that may sound like an absurd goal, but it is not as absurd as it may sound. I grabbed the wrong brown, so I'm just going to push that around a little bit there. And that will become part of the texturing later. Remember, when painting, you can most of the time, if you make a mistake painting, you can work it into the final product, so long as it's a simple mistake and not a gross one. But you don't want to just layer the paint on super heavily, because at some point it will take away any of the texture underneath. Then you have to create texture, which can be a big job. So Youngji is a sort of muscle mommy. And I say muscle mommy not because she's of maternal age, but in the way that a lot of people on the internet use it. Frankly, a lot of sort of simp-inclined people to refer to, a strong, powerful woman with, strong physique. Frankly, she'd be offended at being called a muscle mommy because she does not have kids, and she really doesn't want anybody calling her mommy. But for a visual reference, that's what I'm going with, muscle mommy. And she and Smythe have found themselves out of the gate, working against heavy odds together. Both of them have some prejudices against them. She's a foreigner. Although the people of Almadra are pretty enlightened in terms of women, they're not used to women being frontline fighters, especially martial arts, which is a pretty unknown thing for them. And she certainly was not welcome to be a fighter back home. Technically, in Pathfinder rules, she's a monk, but martial artist would be a better term for her, and certainly the one used in the story. I have a single gnat flying around here that's bugging me. Don't know where it came from. All right, let's try this again. I had too much water on the brush. It's still a little liquidy. What's going on here? I'm liking the color for the brick. It's a little too watery. Did I not mix it well enough? Both characters are 19, just kind of a default starting adventuring age in my mind. Smythe has grown up in a very urban environment. He considers himself pretty jaded. He's not really as jaded as he thinks he is, but he has faced a lot of prejudice being of heavily orc heritage. In this city, orcs originally were brought into the city as laborers, and they're considered kind of dumb and just simple laborers. The truth is, orcs are not as dumb as humans tend to believe they are. But even if they have, a small racial predisposition to being not as intellectual, that difference got wiped out a long time ago because there's almost no full-blooded orcs in Al Madra. You'd have to go way outside the city to find some of the nomadic tribes to find full-blooded orcs. The truth is they're heavily interwoven. There, I'm liking that red. Heavily interwoven with humans at this point, and you'd be hard-pressed to find a pure-blooded orc. In fact, the reality is, although some of the nobility and the upper classes pride themselves on being pure human, very few of them are. There's little tidbits of blood everywhere. If they had a 23andMe for fantasy races, people would be shocked all over at, oh my God, I'm 1% orc? Great grandma, great grandma, what happened? Little bits here. I'm debating. There we go. Get out of there. Another little bit left over from the 3D printing that I missed before. Youngji, in contrast, is 100% human, sort of, except there is actually some divine blood in her background. Now, this is going to get into lore stuff in the world of Raol, but there are no true gods anymore. They all were destroyed centuries ago. But there are still remnants of divine power that exist in the world. And one of them is in her family bloodline. Now, she is a far distant relation of the Emperor, but she has enough that through discipline, she may be able to stoke it to life and exploit it. And in fact, she has already begun to do so at the beginning of the story. Although it's not real evident. It will become more evident in this story that's happening right now, which is the second arc. As they meet the brothers who have stolen the books that were in the Wizard's Tower that they escaped from in the first arc. And this will tie into a bigger mystery happening that will take place over time. Now, Youngji is a good counterpart to Smythe. Like Smythe, she believes that she's more worldly than she actually is in some ways. And in some ways, like Smythe, she has good reason for feeling that way. I mean, she certainly has been subjected to discrimination, in her case, more for being a woman than for her race. Both of them want to prove themselves. And both of them have started out with a bad hand for what they want to be in life, and have had some advantages and some setbacks, and are not as worldly as they believe they are. I think I've repeated myself on that. But it's an important point. And they will not always be the sole main characters. I think they will always probably be the central focus characters, but there will be more members of the Ratcatchers that join over time, until it becomes a fairly decent-sized guild group, with a number of side stories for additional characters. I'm still deciding who's the next character to join their group, but I want to spend at least 2 arcs, and it may be 3 or 4 arcs, with just the 2 of them before I add any additional characters. I want to give time for their stories to be told a little bit in background and to get to know them before diluting the screen time, so to speak. I'm really digging this red. I believe this was a red for the Scorn armies in War Machine, or what do they call it? The Warlock equivalent to War Machine, Hordes. All right. Yeah, I'm digging that. These steps are wooden planks, so they are different treatment. Okay, let's try to avoid putting my hands in the wet paint. And as I go, I'm introducing a number of new races or variations of races that don't exist in Pathfinder, as well as other mechanical stuff. Like Smythe's Wizard School is not a standard Pathfinder one. It's based more on exploring physics and manipulating energy in physical environments. So lots of telekinesis type stuff. And Parchment's Tome Rat race is definitely a new thing that I will have some special rules for. Let's see. And Parchment will feature heavily into why they end up being called the rat catchers. But that is a surprise for a story to come. But they will not be going into the sewers to chase down rats, a la the classic, first level adventure trope story for beginning fantasy RPGers. No, nothing quite like that. It'll be a bit different and involves an airship, a blimp specifically. But that's a couple of arcs away still. And arcs are basically compiled stories. I'm doing them in 500 to 800 word chunks now 3 times a week. I was putting them out almost every day, but I think I've got enough of a foundation now that I can slow down a little bit and spend some time on other stuff. Dun, 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 dun. I know that Lynn is probably going to dissect this for YouTube shorts and stuff, maybe TikToks or whatever, after I'm done. And I really do wonder, amongst this random babbling, what she's going to pull out of it and actually make me sound decent and semi-coherent. But for those who might be interested in rat catchers, who normally read my erotica, I will warn you, there's not going to be any erotica in rat catchers. If you want to read an erotica story set in the world of Raoul, you can read my Chained Lamp story. And those characters may make an appearance in rat catchers at some point, because I like that crew, and I wouldn't mind doing more stories with the crew. Which, for those who haven't read it, is a story of privateers who are on the high seas and find an abandoned ship. It is a lesbian girl story. Well, I'm not sure either character is actually a lesbian, but it is a girl story. And certainly a lot of affection, but also a sort of one-night stand, which I don't discuss in the story, but definitely becomes more than one night. But I wouldn't say they become super romantic or anything. It's more of friends with benefits on the high sea. But the friendship is significant and real. Maybe I'll do a story where the ship's alchemist Crippins accidentally creates a, you know, lust potion vial and it spreads across the ship. I'm not sure I want to write what the Minotaur ends up doing, but I know there'd be an audience for it. Oh no, don't attack me, Mr. Minotaur, with that giant schlong. If you're listening to this and thinking nobody would read somebody having their guts rearranged 6 days to Sunday by an inhumanly giant dick, well, I have news for you. I'd like to point out, the monster erotica section of any site that sells it. But I'm joking. Of course I would include that scene. It'd have to be done. But Ratcatchers is not erotica, so we're not going to have that. There may be some romance storylines, maybe a little bit of sexiness, but not erotica. When it gets to that point, it will fade to black. And it won't be between Youngji and Smythe. They are like brother and sister. They have fallen into each other's circle with friendship. And yes, I do believe that men and women can be friends. Oh my God. Let's not go down that dumbass trope line of we're different species, so we can only interact when our genitals touch. Oh Lord, I despise that attitude so much. Do you know how many female friends in my life I've just watched movies with, played Magic with, whatever? One of my best friends for many years. We've drifted apart over time, unfortunately, but I still chat with her every rare now and then. She's a lesbian. And, we used to do tickle fights and stuff all the time. It was never sexual. I never thought it was. She never thought it was. We just enjoyed horseplay. She did tell me once that if, she was interested in a guy and she wanted to try a guy out, she'd give me a call. But that never happened. She eventually married another woman who's I only, met in passing, but seemed very sweet. I am very happy for her. Alrighty. I think that's pretty good for the brick. I'm happy with that as a base color. For a sequel to Chained Lamp, I'll come up with something better than Crippins makes a love potion. That'd be a little too close to the first story. All right. Okay, so we got the barrels done, and I'm only talking about basing here because tons and tons of work to do. I got the barrels done, got the fence done, except for the connecting bands. Got brickwork done, got the slate roof done. I'm pretty happy with that for base colors for today. I'll have to think about what to do for the yard though, and that dirt. Or with that texturing, probably should do it as hay, which would make sense. If there's no grass, you want something to provide something underfoot other than just mud. Okay. Come up with a darker gray for the little stones around the edge. And maybe mirror that with the archway stones here. Alrighty. I have to think about what to do for the mirrors. I'm thinking like a stained glass effect for the mirrors, maybe. Be a little fancy, but be neat. Otherwise, I could just do like a reflective silver. But definitely something with some reflective elements in it. All right. Well, I think that's enough for this morning. We will continue this project next week, along with more indeterminate babbling from me. Once I find my utility knife and I cut this little section off that I missed before. As I said before, this is a process, and sometimes after you apply the primer, you see things that you didn't see before. And I just put my hands in the paint again. Gosh darn it. But yes, primer and paint will show you things that you did not see when you just had the base material. All right, that is all for today. Everyone have a good week. Bye.